Namaskar and welcome to In Focus. With just 2 episodes left before the end of this 2.5-year series, we today present the first of 2 interviews with 2 of the most senior, the most respected members of the government. Next week we shall be talking to the Home Minister Lal Krishna Advani, but today in an exclusive interview, the Defence Minister and President of the Samta Party, George Fernandes, is my guest. Mr. Fernandes, I want to talk to you not just as Defence Minister, but as a politician who's always believed that the government must be accountable, and as a man who always believes that ministers must speak openly. In that spirit, let me put you a question that must be on everyone's lips. Why is it that even 5 months after coming into being, the government looks as if it's still under threat from internal differences and divisions?
Well, firstly, we are a coalition, and coalition governments invariably have their internal pulls and pressures, and we are naturally subjected to those pulls and pressures. Secondly, there are external pressures in the sense that within the country, those who in the first instance did not want this coalition to come into existence have been from day one working to see how it can be made to disintegrate.
Every day today, we have in television, we have on the papers, a sort of spectacle. Allegations of bribery and corruptionship, political one-upmanship, political grandstanding. India deserves better, doesn't it?
Yes, I agree with you that India deserves better and our people deserve much better. And what's happening is a very unpleasant thing. If when anyone has any charges, then those charges must be made with adequate evidence and pursued vigorously.
Or not made at all.
Or not made at all.
So in fact, what's happening behind the disguise of charges is irresponsible behavior.
I wouldn't call it just irresponsible behavior, but I believe that there is a method in that exercise, that you do anything and everything that is possible to prevent a government from settling down to governance. You create situations where the focus is on the charges made or the situations that you have created outside, which have no relevance at all to governance.
You're actually saying that Jayalalitha is behaving in a way to prevent the government from functioning, from actually governing. But why would she do this?
Well, I don't know whether she realizes that what she is doing is leading towards that. Perhaps her thinking would be that I have a grievance and that grievance must be resolved, and that is the priority.
So it's even worse. She perhaps doesn't even realize the gravity of what she's doing. She's behaving so selfishly, it's almost blind.
Well, whether one should call it selfishness or not being able to realize the significance of what's happening, consequent upon what she is doing.
In your eyes, this constitutes the single biggest problem the government faces, this constant, ceaseless drip of pressure and sabotage from Chennai.
Well, it's not only Chennai. I don't think it's Chennai alone that is creating problems for this government. If what she is doing just now is indeed creating a problem, but I don't think it's Chennai alone. You saw how Parliament functioned. Parliament could hardly do any legislative business. I am talking of blocking Parliament from functioning, and that's what the opposition has done. And that also adds to the, ultimately in any kind of a parliamentary system of governance, the opposition also has a duty, and the duty is to keep the government on its toes, act as a watchdog, and see that the system is allowed to work.
Okay, in a sense, of course, you can't control what the opposition does. The opposition is there to oppose. But one expects the government to be able to control its own partners, to control its own allies. How much has the image of the government, this wonderful experiment that was going to be the dawn of a new India, suffered because of Jayalalitha primarily, but perhaps some of the other allies as well? This tutu meme, how much has it destroyed the government standing?
Well, I think it has made a dent. One cannot dispute the fact that there has been a dent in the...
Just a dent or serious damage?
I would say there has been a dent, because all said and done, the government has been doing its work despite all the odds, the government has its achievements, and therefore.
But isn't that the sad part? The government has its achievements, and I grant you that. But today in public perception, what's remembered is the tutu meme, the allegation that the Prime Minister's office is corrupt, the reverse letters being sent, the replies from lowly officials. It's this charade and tamasha that captivates people, not the achievements.
Yes, that's true, because there is this old adage that anything positive is propaganda and anything negative is news. So therefore, this is how I think the media operates, and this is how people also have got it in their minds.
And when you said there was cleverness, there was a method in this madness. This is the method in the madness. She's playing to the media, and she knows that she has the government on the defensive as a result.
No, I would not only pinpoint a person. I believe that it's the whole government could not be rattled or otherwise made to look as being in difficulties only because of one person.
Let me put something to you. I'll remind you of a moment of sagacity and perceptiveness on your part. You said to me in January that you, and I quote, "My principles have led me to a position where I am very strongly opposed to any understanding with either Jayalalitha or her AIDMK MPs." And you also said that if the AIADMK MPs joined the government, you would personally be very reluctant to do so. Given all that's happened, and given the way it's happened, do you regret joining the government now?
Well, I didn't want to join the government. That's a very well-known fact. I joined the government under great pressure, both from my party and from the Prime Minister. And having joined the government, then it was my duty to see that my government functioned, and particularly the responsibility that was given to me as Minister of Defence was acted upon with all the capabilities.
But do you regret that Jayalalitha was brought into the government, that her allies were brought in?
Well, I think at that point in time there was, as far as the Prime Minister is concerned and as far as this ruling coalition is concerned, there was no other alternative.
But in a sense, what you were saying in January is that if the AIDMK becomes part of the government, then there will be not only constant bickering, but the government as a whole will be under pressure to do things that you would consider to be wrong, that you would consider to be improper, and that's what's happening.
Well, it would not be right for me to say that I had visualized all that is now happening when I made that statement. My statement at that time had a limited purpose, and that purpose was to make my position clear that I would like to walk a certain path, and I would not like to move away from that.
And you were also expressing an instinctive, principled wariness of her and her party.
Well, I did express, and I continue to have a feeling that if things could have taken a different turn, it may have been better. But they could not have taken because there was no option.
In January, you also said to me that there were two conditions for your joining the government. One was that a common minimum agenda be agreed afterwards, and the second, in a sense, was the issue of corruption. And again, I'll quote what you said. You said that there will be no compromise on corruption at any level, and not in the abstract, but I mean this in the concrete sense of the term. Now, Jayalalitha has raised perhaps one of the most fundamental issues of corruption when she's pointed at two senior members unnamed in the Prime Minister's office. What should the government do about this?
Well, I think the government did what it should have done, namely asked her to name the men and what exactly the size of the corruption was.
And she's failed to do that pointedly, so now what happens?
Well, now I think the Prime Minister has to think over the problem and act.
Do you think these are grounds, as Mamta Banerjee has said, for cutting free of the AIDMK and asking them to leave and resign from the government?
Well, I think that's a matter which any one of us singly should not be discussing. It's a matter which should be discussed either in the coordination committee or in the cabinet or at a certain level with the Prime Minister.
But are you of that view that perhaps this is time for this sort of drastic action?
Well, individual views also should be expressed within the collective, because we as a collective are the government.
But I do notice one thing, that you're not saying Mamta Banerjee was wrong.
Well, Mamta has always had very strong views, and she gives vent to her views. I respect her for her views.
Okay, let's extricate ourselves from the nitty-gritty of Jayalalitha and come back to the wider subject, which is why is it that this experiment in coalition, today, 5 months afterwards, still looks threatened. One issue, as you identified, was this question of the behavior of the allies. The second, in a sense, was the way you've been attacked by the opposition. What about an issue that people discuss on the roads of Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta? They say that perhaps, in a sense, there's also a certain measure of fault with the Prime Minister. He isn't assertive enough. He gives in too easily. He's too tolerant.
He has a very grave responsibility to perform, and it's not an easy thing for him to do.
I suppose the view really is this, that things began to go wrong the first time Jayalalitha sulked, and instead of calling her bluff, the government sent Mr. Jaswant Singh to appease her. And from then onwards, it was a sort of slippery slope.
Well, I think he did the right thing. Both the Prime Minister and Jaswant Singh did the right thing, because what they were trying to do was to save the coalition. Because there were people who were keen to see that the coalition fell apart, and they tried to save it.
Okay, so the Prime Minister, Mr. Jaswant Singh, and their general attitude of let's accommodate was the right one. Then is the opposite true? That they were dealing with a lady who was determined to exploit, who was determined to extract advantage, and that was something they couldn't really handle.
No, she had some demands, she had some grievances, and they had to be addressed. And what Jaswant Singh then tried to do was to address them. And the Prime Minister tried to do was to help to sort them out.
But didn't we reach a situation where you address one and suddenly she raises a new one? And every day there is this tutu meme of demand, redressal, confrontation, appeasement. And the image has emerged that this is a government that's on the run, not because of problems from outside, but because its own people are quarreling and bickering.
Well, I think, let's face it, there is a large section of the media that is not reconciled to the existence of this government. And I think they have their own agenda, which
You're
they are
saying
pursuing
the fault,
very vigorously.
You're blaming the messenger? You're saying the fault lies with the press?
No, no. I'm only making a point that is obvious to anyone who knows how this whole exercise is being conducted.
Aren't you feeding the worst of the media in giving them evidence to support the case they're trying to make? Aren't your allies, aren't your problems adding to it?
Well, as I said, that in a coalition you will invariably have these problems. Either one looks at the positive side of what is happening and sees that that positive side is encouraged, or one looks at the negative and then one tries to go for the kill.
Do you think, again, as some people say, that if someone like Mr. Advani had been Prime Minister, the government would have cohered better despite its many coalition partners, its internal pulls and pressures?
Well, I think such a question is only, can only create misunderstandings and create more problems for the government, rather than see that the government functions and that the government carries on without having one more issue to
Of course, it would only,
debate publicly.
Mr. Fernandes, it would only create a misunderstanding if the answer to my question was, yes, Mr. Advani would have been better.
No, it does not. It's when one tries to juxtapose two persons from a party or two persons from a coalition and then say, now who between the two would be better, then immediately one starts one more controversy, and then to that extent one gets into another area of debate which compounds what you have said as the image of the government
is there any
not being particularly good.
Is there any significance to be drawn from the fact that you didn't answer my question by saying no one could be better than Mr. Vajpayee?
Well, that again would be not a proper way of posing it. For the
Because
reason
perhaps
that,
it's not your real opinion?
No, for the reason that I don't think Atal Bihari Vajpayee really needs any certificate from me or from anybody for that matter. I think he has been doing a magnificent job, and as I said, he has been under such tremendous pressure, both mental as well as physical, that it's not fair to the man to put him under that kind of pressure.
You say he's been under tremendous pressure, both mental and physical. Let me ask you something that's been in the press. You can clarify it for us. Is he unwell?
Not to my knowledge. And I personally believe that all those stories are also a part of the effort to make the government be on tenterhooks.
What happened on the 15th? Because you were there when he stumbled. You were there when he got out of the car and perhaps he'd forgotten his shoe. What happened? Was it just an accident and forgetfulness, or was it a symptom of something more?
No, I think any one of us could, wear a very loose kind of a shoe or a chappal like I wear. You can always make a mistake in getting down.
What about the stumbling?
In the excitement of the moment.
What about the stumbling?
The stumbling, as the doctors pointed out, and they pointed out at that very point in time. I was by his side. I won't say by his side, but I was there where he was. And don't forget that he spoke for a long time, standing there. He spoke with great passion.
37 minutes. Usually prime ministers end up speaking for over an hour.
Okay, but he made one of the better speeches that have been made from that.
I interrupted you. We were saying you were there. What happened at the time?
Yes, when he finished his speech and he moved to come down, it was obvious that there was something which bothered him, and he stumbled. He had to be helped down. But when he came down, it took him just a couple of minutes to fully recover. And then I escorted him to the lift, and he went down by the lift, and he came home. And then he did his day's work.
So it was just a muscular spasm?
Yes.
Not, as one of the newspapers has commented, a symptom of prostate cancer or anything?
Absolute rubbish.
One last question. People say the passion, the spark, the zest, the oratory has gone. Is that the case?
I won't say that. I don't think any of those things are gone. But the man is weighed down, and is weighed down not for his fault, but the faults of a whole lot of people around him. Around him meaning all those who are today trying to see that this establishment works properly.
Is he tired?
I won't say he's tired, but he's certainly weighed down and is
disheartened?
He's under tremendous both mental and physical fatigue, that one has to admit.
Is he disheartened by the way things have worked out?
Well, if he is, he hasn't said that, because when we sit down and we discuss in cabinet meetings and outside, he is his usual self.
But one would expect him to be disheartened, because this was going to be a turning point for India, and there's such a sense of disillusionment instead. He must feel a concern for that.
Yes, a person who is very sensitive, a person who cares for the country, and when he feels that from all sides the country is being buffeted, and within the country people who should know better are failing in their duty, then I believe that a man of his sensitivity is bound to feel weighed down further.
So he's a sensitive person who, in a sense, is a little disillusioned with the way things are working out.
I think any sensitive man would be disillusioned with the way things are conducted in our country.
Mr. Fernandes, I'll take a quick commercial break there. I want to come back in the very limited time we have to just touch on one issue, but I think it's an issue on which, once again, we could benefit from your interpretation. But first, we take a quick commercial break. Don't go away. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back. We're talking to the Defense Minister, George Fernandes. Mr. Fernandes, we have time literally for just one small, simple issue. The President charted new territory in his Independence Eve interview, where not only did he reveal his political thinking on certain subjects, but in doing so, he's made it legitimate for people to comment on it and to criticize it if need be. Was that a good or bad thing for him to do?
I think it was a very good thing that he did, and I'm very happy.
What about the fact that Mr. Narayanan is so closely identified with the office he holds that as a result of his interview, today the presidency of India is identified with political positions which you or I may not agree with?
Well, I think the president was not identifying himself with any political positions or wanted to be identified with any political positions. What he was trying to do was to tell the country that there are things that are wrong in the manner in which we are moving forward, and we need to constantly get into introspective situations.
But in fact, he went further than that. He also said repeatedly in the interview that the Nehruvian vision for the future of India was absolutely essential to the development of India. By implication, that says that a different vision which you may hold or the BJP may hold doesn't have quite the same relevance. Can you accept that?
Well, I don't think one should kind of join issue on the choice of words that he made. Nehruvian vision has never been defined. If it means a country which decides to chart its independent course, take on all the challenges, meet with every situation, and then there is no difference of
Quite right. At that level of generality, everyone could agree.
Yes.
But the BJP, for instance, your ally in government, has always identified the Nehruvian vision as something that they have fundamental disagreements with. For instance, they think his attitude to secularism was not quite their attitude to secularism. They identify it differently. Now, suddenly they find that the President of India, without qualifying what he means, has actually identified one vision as essential to the future.
No, that's the point, without qualifying what he means. That's the point. That the President is sharing his concerns, President is sharing his views with the nation. Normally presidents read speeches which are written for them by some bureaucrat on behalf of the cabinet.
Which is why they remain above politics. But when they step down into the arena and share their views, they become political animals like you and me.
No, on the contrary. The President in his constitutional responsibility as President will necessarily function within those constitutional limitations. But a President who is sensitive, who understands the challenges before the nation, who believes that there has to be constant course correction, has the inherent duty, I believe, to express himself.
Is it for the President to course correct in public? Isn't that taking on a political role beyond his constitutional parameters?
No. I believe that a President in setting the agenda in certain areas, for instance, when he speaks about corruption, when he speaks about the way Parliament is functioning, there's no politics involved in this. And if he can speak on those issues where nobody has written a speech and he gives vent to his concerns and to his feelings,
then he can speak on other issues as well.
I believe that there is absolutely no harm in the President giving expression to various issues that are facing the country and how one deals with them.
So this is very interesting, Mr. Fernandes. Very quickly, you're saying that actually the President can quite legitimately, to use your phrase, course correct and also set the agenda. That's a legitimate thing for the President to do.
Well, ultimately there is a government in the country. That government functions within its constitutional framework. There the President has his duty to perform, which he performs. But the President as a citizen is, in my view, quite within his powers to tell the country where he thinks things are going wrong and where he believes that they should be corrected.
You don't think that there will be necessary, not just understandable, but necessary confusion when the President tries to wear two different hats? Because people will say, it's the same person. How do we know whether he's speaking as an individual or as head of state?
Look, let me tell you, the President, if you have a government, the President may present a government's program and say that my government will do this. 3 months after he has made that presentation, the government may be out and a new government may be there, and the President may be saying quite the opposite of what he said 3 months earlier.
Yes, but he's always doing it as the President. Now you're saying there are also moments when he can talk as Mr. Narayanan.
No, I'm on the limited point that if the President said one thing then, and the President says another thing now, if there is no confusion in the minds of the people, then there can be no confusion. When the President, speaking ex cathedra as President, makes a statement which is the government statement, and when the President, when he's talking to the people of the country, also gives vent to his concerns and how he thinks Parliament should function, government should function, citizens should function, and gives expression to those feelings, I don't see why there should be any misunderstanding in the minds of anybody.
Mr. Fernandes, let's leave it there because I think that is perhaps the clearest expression of what many will regard as a constitutional departure, but perhaps an interesting one, that the President can speak and should speak with two hats if he so chooses, provided it's clear what he's doing. Let's leave it there. I think you've raised an issue that now the audience and others will decide for themselves. Thank you very much for talking so openly to In Focus. That's it for this week. We'll be back next week with the last interview of this series when we interview the Home Minister Lal Krishna Advani. But for today, from the Defence Minister's office in South Block, New Delhi, goodbye.